If you're struggling to cope after the recent full moon eclipse, then this week's episode of the Mainly Moonology podcast is for you. Welcome to the Mainly Moonology podcast. I'm your host, Yasmin Boland, an award-winning astrologer and the Sunday Times best-selling author of books including Moonology and creator of the Moonology Oracle cards. My intention for this podcast is to help you understand how you can create your dream life using mainly Moonology, the moon, as your guide. So how are you doing after the full moon eclipse? We're now out of the eclipse season, but we are in what you could call the aftermath. I know many of you have been doing it tough since the eclipse because you've written to me, and actually I've been having a bit of a rough time as well. So I thought this week, as well as having a look at the astrology of the week ahead, I would talk about the power of surrendering. Normally I say surrender to the divine, but this week I'm going to say the power of surrendering to the moon. So what do I mean by that? So here's the thing. Eclipses are very strange times, as you might have noticed. Life can go what seems like a little bit haywire when we have an eclipse, especially if it hits your chart strongly. We've just had 2 moon eclipses, and the first one was in Scorpio and the second one was in Taurus. Now, the thing to really be aware of is that it doesn't matter if you're not a Scorpio or a Taurian and you don't have either of those signs rising. We've all got those 2 signs in our charts somewhere. That is just how astrology works. And I am actually about to record a special mini guide to explain that. But the point is that eclipses affect us all, but especially if they hit our chart. Now, if you know your chart, you will know whether or not the eclipse has hit you, because you need to really know the degrees of your chart. And I think if you know the degrees of your chart, you'll also know the degrees of the eclipses. But in a nutshell, the first eclipse was in the first early degrees of Scorpio, and the second eclipse was in the mid degrees of Taurus. Either way, regardless of if you know your chart or not, if you are going through a rough time right now, there is really only one thing I can really highly recommend to you. And it's actually, funnily enough, a knock-on from last week when I suggested to surrender to the divine. And what I did last week, if you missed last week's episode, have a listen. At the end, there is a chant, Om Namo Narayani. And that chant is a chant that I learned in India many, many years ago now, probably 18 years ago. And, I'm going to be completely transparent here. I was raised a Christian. I was raised Catholic. And, sometimes I think, what am I doing being a sort of person who was raised Christian and Catholic, and here I am chanting in Sanskrit with a mantra that I learned in India where it's all Hindu. And then I think, you know what? God is God. God is God. The goddess is the goddess. The divine is the divine, and spirituality is spirituality. So whether you choose to, get down on your knees and make the sign of the cross and say, "Dear God, I surrender my situation to you," or you decide that you want to surrender it all to the goddess, or you want to do the Sanskrit chant, it doesn't really matter, I don't think. There is a line in the Bible that says it's hard. I think the only way to the Father is through the Son. But, if you even just scratch the surface of ancient history, you will find out that, in fact, before Christianity, there was the goddess religion, the mother religion, there was the matriarchy. So my feeling is, at the end of the day, we are probably all kind of God and goddess ourselves. And when we surrender to the divine being a beautifully non-gendered name, I mean, is the divine feminine, masculine, God, goddess, Jesus, any other religious figures you like to think of. When we surrender to the divine, it's really a way of saying, I accept what is going on in my life right now. And I trust that out of this only good will come. And I trust that what is unfolding right now is for my highest good. And this kind of relates to the idea that we come to Earth with a purpose. We come to this planet for a reason, to accomplish something. We all have a life purpose. And, purpose is something that's been on my mind lately. And I think it's really important to say, not everybody has a purpose to change the world in a really dramatic way that lands them on the front page of the newspaper or gets them in a magazine or makes them an internet superstar or a YouTube superstar. Some people do have a calling to, I don't know, my cousin, for example, has been working in Africa on and off for years with NGOs and non-profits and, helping people in Africa. That is her purpose. But, equally, I feel that you can have a purpose which is literally just supporting someone else in their life while they do their good work. Or you can have a purpose to raise an amazing child or amazing couple of children. Or, I know this sounds crazy, but sometimes I even think you can have a purpose just to, every now and then say exactly the right thing to someone to help them keep going, to help them be motivated. Maybe you have a purpose that every now and then you're the person who posts an inspirational quote on Facebook, which saves someone from, jumping off a bridge or whatever. The point is that we all have a purpose, and eclipses are really about helping us get back in touch with our purpose if we have lost our way and gone off track. Now, if you have done that big time, if you have wandered way off track, if you've got yourself involved in a toxic relationship, if you've allowed yourself to stay stuck in a job when you actually want to do something else, if you're not living your life the way you really, really want it to, because on some level you have a purpose and, it can be, if you're not living on purpose, eclipses are tough because they come along and they just give you a whack and they say, you know what you're meant to be doing. You're not doing it. Here I am. I'm going to slap you out of where you are and into where you need to be. So this is why I come back to the idea that if you are having a tough time at the moment, if life is really testing you, if you're not really sure how you've ended up in the situation you're in and you're just wondering, when am I going to feel better? What the heck? How is this all happening to me? Try and trust and try and spend time, whether you do it in a Christian way or another religion or spirituality, just surrendering to the divine, and to bear in mind the idea that we are all divine. And as I said, we have a purpose. And the reason why I'm going on about that is because on some level, we know what our purpose is. We are multi-dimensional beings, okay? So when you surrender to the divine, you're also surrendering to yourself, and you're surrendering to the possibility that you've wandered off the path and you need to get back on the path. Because whatever it is, whatever your purpose is, we all have big work to do. So there are some really nice astrological aspects around, which is really good news for anyone who's having a tough time. We are going to get the first quarter moon, which is a really important time in terms of this cycle we're currently in. It's like the first sign that we are halfway out of this waning cycle after the eclipse, which is going to be challenging for a lot of people. But also on the 15th of November, so that'll be tomorrow if you're listening to this on the Monday, which is the day the podcast comes out, We're going to have a Venus trine Jupiter connection, which is really beautiful. And also, Venus is in the sign of Scorpio at the time of the alignment. So that's actually really nice as well, because the new moon eclipse was in Scorpio, and which is opposite Taurus, which is where the full moon eclipse was. So it could be some kind of healing after whatever you've been through. Also, after that, Venus moves into the sign of Sagittarius. And that's going to be really good if you've been having relationship issues, because Venus in Scorpio is, really deep and passionate and powerful. But at the same time, it can be quite challenging, especially when we've got Mars retrograde, we've had the eclipses, and Venus moving into Sag is going to perk things up again. And also then on the 16th, on Wednesday, we are getting a lovely Mercury trine to Jupiter as well, also from Scorpio. So, things are kind of looking up. But remember, we have this Mars retrograde happening as well, and it's making another square to Neptune this week. So there still could be some confusion. But overall, hopefully you're feeling like you're on the right track. And my strong advice to you is just to keep surrendering. So I've made a kind of executive decision as I've been recording this. I did say that if you wanted to hear my Om Namo Narayani, I Surrender to the Divine track, have a listen to last week's podcast. But you know what? I'm actually going to put it on now for anybody who needs it, so you don't have to go looking for it and you don't miss out if you're just too busy. So just for a few minutes now, settle back. They're not words, they're Sanskrit vibrations. Om Namo Narayani. And it literally means I surrender to the Divine Mother, or I surrender to the Divine Goddess. And remember, we are all divine. So can you understand this idea that on some level you're surrendering to yourself, because you're surrendering to the fact that you came here for a reason, that you do have a purpose, and whatever is going on for you right now is happening because you haven't been on the right track to fulfill that purpose. So by surrendering to the divine and surrendering to yourself, think of it as surrendering to your purpose and allowing life to unfold. Post the eclipses, it's never that easy, but surrender will really, really help. Om Namo Narayani. 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 Om I hope that helped you. And if you're still listening, then I think you'll be a really good person to hear what I'm about to say, which is that every month we run something called the Moonology Manifesting Challenge. And if you are going through a tough time at the moment, I honestly think it might help you. It's all about manifesting, but really what it's also about is about clearing away negativity. We actually start it at the quarter moon, so it's going to be starting this week. So you need to act fast if you want to do it. It just helps you to clear away the past, clear away upsets, and to start to think about what it is you actually want to create in your life. So if you'd like to do that, hop over to moonologymanifestingchallenge.com and I'll see you soon. Lots of love. I hope you've enjoyed this week's Mainly Moonology podcast. If you've enjoyed it, please subscribe, give us a review, and we'll be eternally grateful. We publish the podcast every Monday, 4 p.m. UK time, 8 a.m. Pacific, 11 a.m. Eastern, and I'm afraid to say it's silly o'clock in Australia, but it will be there when you wake up on a Tuesday morning. Have a great week.